Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins. Today's a little bit different because I'm joined with two special guests, Tereza and Noni. You're both very, very welcome to the Global Discussion. I'm pretty sure in saying that this is the first time we've had two guests on the same episode. So that's a fantastic milestone. And I'm delighted you're both here because you're both involved in something very, very exciting. Teresa, you've been on the Global Interview, which was sort of the pre-runner to the Global Discussion. We published over 400 written articles with creatives and leaders and thinkers, and you were one of those. We talked about the wonderful world of being the CEO and founder of this wonderful virtual wine concierge business that you run. But now we've got sort of food involved in the mix here. And Noni, it's great to have you here as well to tell us all about this. So let's begin by asking maybe both of you to jump in here and tell us a little bit about your journey. I think at the time of recording, we're on about week 20. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and tell us a little bit about this new exciting sort of venture that you're on. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Simon. Noni, would you like to begin? Or I will say one small snippet and then I will turn it over to Noni, because Simon, thank you. First off, it is a pleasure to be back with you and very exciting to be 201 episodes with two guests. I very much appreciate that. Noni, I came to know you by way of a LinkedIn audio room that you did, What is Food Diversity? And I was a listener. I came up on stage and we had such a great rapport with each other. And this is actually the first time that you and I are on video talking about this. Usually we'll be talking on the LinkedIn audio about it. So you did What is Food Diversity? And we were talking about everything from how and why in corporate, in the offices where there's not enough food or not the types of food for vegetarians or for people with allergies and all of that. And my restaurant and wine world kind of came into being, and you asked me if I would co-host with you for the next one. And that began the journey that we're going to talk about. So I thought I'd put it over to you now, and you can talk about how you came to doing that in the first place.
Yay. Thank you so much. Thanks, Teresa, for that. And Simon, for you as well. It was a very interesting journey for me at least to start off with. And, before anything, congratulations once again on 201 episode plus and piloting a 2-guest episode for of course. But as far as my journey with the LinkedIn audio event, there's two things. First is I didn't exactly know what professional topic I could talk about because I'm not in HR, nor do I have much knowledge in that, despite being in HR myself. It's a very new field for me, and I wasn't sure exactly what kind of conversation I would want to have within the HR area or recruiting or talent acquisitions that LinkedIn's usually known for. So I decided that I will do something that that I know about, that I'm familiar with, that I feel comfortable with, and something that I have not only personally experienced with my own diet journey, but also my colleagues who I worked with for a long time in my previous role at work. And that was regarding food. I had initially started working at a corporate job, my big girl job. I had never had a corporate job before, and it was an office job where we would work with high net worth clients and basically serve them and support their needs and whatever have you. And there was one time where we were so overwhelmed with the storm in New York that the California colleagues had to take over their workload, which means that we can't really go on lunch break because we have double, triple the amount of work that we had to accomplish. And that required our directors and our senior leaders to be like, okay, why don't we just do a working lunch? And then we can not only get some food, but we can also get our task accomplished. And which is great. However, the pitfall or the downfall, you could say, is that the people in charge of ordering food for the colleagues assumed that whatever they get is something that everyone else in the office will be okay with. They ordered Chinese food, no problem. However, every single item that they ordered in family style or catering style had pork in it. Every single thing had pork in it. I grew up in a country where pork was not readily available, and I also cannot digest it. I cannot eat it, literally. And so I could not go in and, hey, grab myself a plate with tofu and pork in it, or at least some kind of, you could say, oil or juices from the meat itself. So I was there sitting at my desk with no food on my plate. I literally, I was just drinking water and soda. And one of the directors who I reported to, she actually walked by and she asked me, why am I not eating? What's going on? And I flat out told her, have you ever considered that there might be non-meat eaters in your workforce? Because for me personally, I don't eat pork because you could say I'm allergic to it. My body doesn't digest the meat. So I can't really eat literally anything that you've purchased. And I had to kindly or humbly remind her that we also have vegetarians that you have not really considered, or people who are vegans because religious reasons, personal reasons, whatever have you. So after that speech, she just kind of stared at me, didn't know what to say because she was embarrassed. And she took her own personal credit card out, handed over to me, and said, just go, please go get something that you can actually eat. I am so sorry for this. So that was the very start of my inspiration on food within the workplace, whether it's corporate, nonprofit, doesn't matter, food within the workplace. And from there on, I actually encouraged my boss to think about other people who she is serving aside from herself and aside from people who are like herself. And then when I moved forward with my corporate world, I became an executive assistant, where of course I was in charge of, catering for big meetings, corporate meetings, board meetings, whatever have you. So it was my job to make sure that people who are attending these meetings do not have any allergies, do not have any specific diets. They're not, diabetic, for example, because their diets are very different. And that made me a little bit more conscious about people and what they can eat. Regardless of age, you could have a 5-year-old diabetic, you never know. So taking that into consideration, I would do surveys. What can you eat? What can you not eat? And whenever there's a nut allergy, specifically, I'm going a little too much into depth, but nut allergy specifically, if we're ordering Thai food as an example, I need to make sure that peanuts is written where it's supposed to be written. And that person who's allergic to peanuts may not go in that direction, just for the safety of them and the liability of the company. So that is a very passionate topic for me, because I was discriminated against because of what I cannot eat as an allergy. So that one thing led to the other from that, and that's what inspired me to do why is food diversity important? And I wanted to get other people's perspectives on why they think food diversity is important, or what even is food diversity. And that made people come and join and learn more about what food diversity is, what should be included in a plate, what should not be really included in a plate, moderation versus excess, things like that. And the first episode was more like an intro to the topic. And that's where Teresa joined. And as I mentioned before the recording, Simon, that even though Teresa has an expertise in her wine concierge and her hospitality industry, I don't necessarily know anything about wine, but what I do know is there are very specific types of global foods that people in the West are not exposed to. And that's what I bring to the table, literally, in comparison to Teresa's wine expertise. And that's where we, I think, complement each other. So that's how I got started within
Well, that's
LinkedIn.
great. And thank you for taking the time to share that story with us, because when you first talk about diversity and food, and you put those two words together, some people might go, well, what are we actually talking about there? But you've able to expand that. And it's interesting whether you're talking about food or drink diversity as well. I've often been at an event where there's only one type of drink available, whether that's alcoholic or not. And sometimes you just want a tea or a coffee. Sometimes you want a water. Sometimes you want a white wine, a red wine. Sometimes you want a short. Sometimes you may want a sparkling few bubbles in a glass. And, you know, sometimes that choice is not available. And when it comes to food in particular, I'm thinking of, you know, from what you were saying there, Noni, that, you know, culture, religion, um, personal preference, and also allergies. I mean, everything is in that melting pot. And as humans, we have to eat now and again to keep going, don't we? So it's kind of a topic that pulls in the whole planet. So it's very exciting. Let me bring Tereza into this. So Tereza, what from your perspective, then obviously you've done many events where you've had to organize maybe the drink side of things more than the food, but there's also the pairings of that, etc. But your involvement in this food diversity discussion, it's obviously something that you spend a lot of time thinking about too, right?
It is. Thank you, Simon. And in that first episode, when you created it, that was just it. When I came on stage, we talked about it, and I came from the restaurant and not only the restaurant side, the consumer side, because I'm on both sides of the table every day, because like you say, Simon, we have to eat once in a while. And the definitely, like you say, wine and beverage is more my laneway. That being said, I've worked with so many chefs, and so at the resort, which I speak about quite often, I was there for 10 years, and it being a resort that's in the middle of a UNESCO biosphere, it's a remote resort. I think back particularly to a time when we had guests who are Jewish, and they asked if we could do kosher meals. And, you know, it's things like that, whereby you're a world-class restaurant, a world-class resort, and delving into that. So, you know, delving into kosher wine and kosher food and what can and can't. And the bigger part, like you say, Noni, it's the allergies or the preferences, because we would get people who would send us lists, and some of the lists were extensive. And when you've got many people, whether it's many people in the group or many people in the family, you need to be able to make sure that you are providing really nutritious, really interesting, and varied diets within all of those. So my interest with regards to it, it came by way of, by the end of the episode, when you asked if I would co-host the next episode, that was when it was kind of the formation for, oh, wow, we come from this really great ebb and flow, this complementary yet contrast. And for me, as you and I have gone through this, Noni, I've looked at it like the A to Z of cuisine, because I live in Canada. I live in Vancouver myself. You live in San Francisco, Noni. And I've quite often said that, and it has been said, Vancouver is second per capita to San Francisco for the number of restaurants. And yet, do we have the varied? Do we have the vegetarian or the vegan? Do we have the allergies? You know, the gluten-free, the celiac, the faith-based, the preferences. And sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So the great thing is, especially even in that first episode, but then in the second and ongoing, your culture, how you were raised, where you were raised, Noni, is a really great complement and contrast to myself. That's, although I've been raised in Canada, with working at the restaurant, I dealt with world cuisine, and I love like Nepal and Bhutan. I'm giving a bit of a teaser because at some point in the podcast that we're launching, then I will actually, we will do Nepalese or Bhutanese food, which is phenomenal. Their street food and all that. And yet it's not really known. And these are the things that, I find exciting because I grew up on a very North American diet in a way, the meat and potatoes and the Canadian food guide and how it changes. And that then expands to how it is in the UK, how it is, in Wales versus Ireland, North versus South, all of that. And then down into Africa, South Africa versus East and so that I think I'm going to put it over to you, Noni, or to you, Simon. But that for me is how and where I've not only come into it, as you can tell, my passion for people, for food, and for wine. It really all comes together. And Noni and I we do work so well together, and
Yeah,
we have.
it sounds like a winning combination, guys. And I suppose while you were talking there, Teresa, it made me think about the different types of global cuisine. I mean, we're on the global discussion today, and different cultures, different communities, different people from different parts of the world. There's this melting pot of different types of food and norms that it's a wealth of information to dive into, to delve into, as you were saying. But also, I think in today's world, and maybe only you could speak to this too, but there's a growing interest in the type of food that we eat, regardless of the cultural aspects or the allergy aspects. But what is good food versus what is continually processed food, and maybe some of the foods that we've been eating over since the modernization of the manufacturing process and the global supermarket growth, etc. But food culture is alive and well within that, isn't it? And that there seems to be a growing passion for quality food. And, it's not a level playing field. Some parts of the world don't have quality food. They don't have access to clean drinking water. So this topic is vast, isn't it, Noni?
100% agree. And you're absolutely right that there's parts of the world that they don't have clean water. There's parts of the world that there's no quality food. And not to be cynical, but we live in the United States. There's no good quality food here, I think. I mean, there are, but we're consistently in the Western society. I'm not really sure about the UK, but at least where I'm in California. Right now, fast food is like a luxury right now. I was literally thinking about eating garbage the other day, and I say the word garbage because I was thinking about McDonald's and as a very quick meal because I was in a rush. And I'm looking at it, the medium size Big Mac meal is costing easily $17 to $18. That's a simple Big Mac meal that was like $5 back in the day, maybe $6, $7, depending on where you live. And I know the cost of living in San Francisco is very high, but still, the inflation is getting out of control. And when we talk about good food, good quality food versus processed food or processed food, I think ev I think food in general is becoming a luxury now, no matter what quality it is. And you have to think 10,000 times, and I'm exaggerating, of course, but you have to think 10,000 times before even purchasing a Big Mac. So can you imagine going to an actual grocery store, going to an actual restaurant where you get proper food, proper nutrition, possibly, and how the amount of money you're paying for that? I could not believe that the cost of a tasty quesadilla is literally $16 versus $7 that it used to be, as an example. So I think the food quality is deteriorating because we do have to feed ourselves, but at the same time, we're feeding ourselves at the expense of our wallet and our health, majority health-wise. So that's the kind
Yeah,
of
it's a great
spiel
point.
I had to share.
No,
Yeah.
it's a great point, Noni, and thank you for sharing that. And I think, I mean, we could spend all day talking about, the health impacts of food because, diet and health and obesity and just the amount of processing that goes on today. And a lot of it is education too. People are not aware of it. So let's bring it back to a little bit about your discussions though, because you're quite a number of discussions in now. You're co-hosting this vibrant topic that needs discussion. But I want to ask you both, what are some of the things that you have been discussing? Because whether it's, barbecue season or, traditional celebratory type foods and everything in between, what are some of the topics that you can think of that you've sort of got real engagement on, or that people have been really passionate about joining in on that conversation over the last sort of 20 or so shows that you've done?
I think for me, Simon and Teresa, I'm so sorry if you wanted to say something, but I
Go
will.
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you. One of my favorite episodes, all-time episodes, was the discussion about bread. And
I agree.
the concept of bread is just so fascinating because the word bread can mean so many different things to so many different people. In the Western society, of course, we talk about sandwich bread, like a French roll bread, focaccia bread as an example. But what about in other places? Pita bread. We're talking about naan. We're talking about flatbreads. We're talking about injera in injera. I'm probably mispronouncing the name, but that's the Ethiopian bread that we're
Mm.
talking about. And then we're talking about bao, which is Chinese bread sandwiches. So every single concept, and I sometimes also think crepes are part of bread because there's Indian crepes and then there's French crepes. There's sweet and savory, all of that stuff. So the concept of bread is actually very fascinating at least to me, because everyone has a different variation of the word bread. And I think it was one of our guests during that episode who mentioned specifically croissants. Um, and he mentioned that just like everyone else, we think that croissants are like a French specialty that we're just mocking in other parts of the world. But in reality, croissants are actually from Austria. And then they were transferred over to France. And then it became a French specialty. But the origin of it is Austria. And the same thing goes with French fries. We say French fries, but it's actually invented in Belgium, excuse me, not Belgian. So, but yeah, I think bread was my all-time favorite. And then we were talking about sweetbreads as well. And so I giggle because I was watching MasterChef Canada and I did not I did not realize that sweetbreads are actually, I believe, testicles, lamb testicles, I think, or another animal testicles. So,
Mhm.
and people eat that as a delicacy. And that's why I giggle because sweetbreads, and we're talking about like dessert breads, but
Yeah.
it's actually called that in fancy and fancy.
Well, we're all learning something today, Noni. So thanks for sharing that. But you mentioned bread, and like you've listed off so many different types of. I mean, I mean, everybody has their own perceptions of bread, and they maybe typical breads that they would have access to or eat. But then when you cast this net globally, it's a whole different conversation, isn't it? And I must share with you both very, very quickly a little personal experience with breads. There was a little old shop not far from where I live that was kind of run down. Nobody had kind of rented it in ages. And a South African gentleman who'd recently moved to the area used to be a baker, very, very sort of village type bakery. in South Africa. And he decided he'd take the lease on. And the lease was expensive, even though it was a little rundown shop, it was expensive. And he said, well, look, I'm kind of retired. I'm going to open this store. And he opened the store, he put the oven in, and he just used to go in there at, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning, roll everything up, get all the dough, the mixture and everything. And he would put the ovens on, and then he would literally open the door to the store, sit in a deck chair in the door. He had no staff, no counters, no signs, nothing. And he would literally fall asleep in the deck chair till about 7, 8 a.m. that morning. He would then take out the fresh bread, put it all in, literally in the window. And people started going in and going in. And over the course of about, it only took about 6 to 12 months, he was hiring people, he had signage, he had shelves. And this has become one of the nationally recognized little tiny bakeries because the ingredients are all natural. There are no additives or preservatives in any of the baking that he does. And it is absolutely sublime. But it just took this one person that knew a little bit about good food to get going. So I just thought I'd throw that into the conversation about bread. But Tereza, what about you? You're part of this conversation, and you were nodding away there when Noni was talking about the bread episode. I know you had a lot of engagement on that. But what for you? What have been some of the highlights or some of the things that you've been discussing that have been particularly interesting from your side of things?
Absolutely. So I will say, although I agree, the interesting thing about the bread episode, and then I'll say my other favorite episode, is that in the bread episode, we were talking because of the engagement that we get with the audience. They come up on stage and share. We ended up talking about KFC, but not just KFC chicken and Korean chicken and KFC in regards to North America versus Europe. And that's what's so great about our conversations is we have a topic and we speak on it. And the sweetbreads, they actually are the thymus gland or the pancreas. So they definitely, again, as a sweetbread, I agree with you, Noni. So many people in the restaurant industry, that's just it, is my kind of my takeaways a lot of the time in our conversations are from the restaurant or the industry perspective, as well as then from being the consumer perspective. And I remember the first time I had sweetbreads, and it's a delicacy, but yet it's something that is not what one would expect, like the bread basket that one has, on the table. Which leads me to my favorite episode, which kind of includes all of the Korean chicken and the KFC and why things taste different in different countries and all that, was our barbecue episode. And that's because, again, barbecue, we were doing it on the Independence Day long weekend. So it's July 1st and July 4th, Canada, US. That being said, our barbecue episode, it encompassed other countries. It's, what is barbecue in New Zealand? You put the shrimp on the barbie. In New Zealand, they do charcoal. So it's, literally taking your vegetables, just whole vegetables and all of that, and immersing them in coal, in the charcoal, to get that real grilled. So these are the two favorite, I would say, because again, it's the engagement, but it's such robust conversation, and it brings other people to the table, no pun intended, that then have, from childhood or from where they live now, what food is accessible, what materials are accessible as well. Because like you say, Simon, that boulangerie, really, that bakery that he just had one, he started with a very simple oven and everybody came to it. It's, the smell, the sound, the taste. Here in Canada, we have a gentleman who he created a bakery by way of, he was challenged with money, in terms, he didn't have a lot. And so he started off by buying one brick or however many bricks at a time that he could, and made a wood fire oven brick by brick. That is as simple as it gets, but it goes to show the passion, the power that one person has to feed a community. So I would
Yeah,
say
I love
that,
that. Love that.
yeah.
And it's also the thing, isn't it, that we often hear the term breaking bread and people coming together. And there's that whole communal aspect that we haven't even explored here. We could have a whole other show about that, but bringing together of people, the celebrations, the anniversaries, the birthdays, the traditions, the religions, just the coming together of people over food. There's something magical about that, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah.
There is. I was
Teresa, can I ask, do you try to sneak in the little wine pairings now and again, or has Noni got you boxed off there?
No, no, not Noni definitely doesn't have me boxed off whatsoever. We do get sometimes questions from either guests or people who want to talk about it. And that's just it. It's not just wine, it's the non-alcoholic, it's kombucha, or talking about, had a whole episode on sodas, in terms of, because that's the reality, is we live in a world where a smile and a Coke, and natural sodas versus the sody pops, and then sensory memory and all that. But definitely, I see us doing many, many great things in terms Global Food Network, which is what Noni and I have chosen as our name for the podcast that we're launching, also has not only a greater scope. Noni has created, if I may say, OZK Studios, or OZK Studios. And I'll let Noni speak to that, because that is the umbrella, the parent company, and encompasses the other facets. So not only do we talk about wine a little bit, or the non-alcoholic, the tea, chai tea, coffee, all of that, but I see there being other spin-offs or other ways that we can build on our communities. I'll give it over.
It's a wonderful segue, because I wanted to ask you both about the next 6, 12 months and what you were thinking about. So Noni, maybe let's talk about OZK. Let's talk about GFN. What's on the roadmap for you guys then? Because it sounds exciting.
Oh, it's definitely very much exciting, and I appreciate Teresa for leading the conversation that way as well. So this is something that I've been wanting to do a very long time. However, I'm only one person, and I just can't do everything by myself because, as I mentioned before the recording, that my brain is quirky and it likes everything. And because my brain likes everything, my body can't function to accomplish everything. So what I did was I decided to find like-minded people who share a little, if not all the interest, but just a little bit of the interest that I've had, and help me expand. So I came up with OZK Studios in the US, but everywhere else in the world, it'll be OZK Studios, which stands for openness, zeal, kindness. And we're all about building communities, one kindness at a time. And one of the aspects of it was food, because I want to be able to build a community around food, as the two of you mentioned earlier. And I want to learn about different types of food, whether it's something I can eat or not eat, doesn't matter. I just want to learn about it. And I want to teach people, or tell people, or educate people about the foods that especially the Western society may have never heard of before. And I had already mentioned those to Teresa, and she's excited to try those foods because I'm excited for her as well. Um, but either way, I decided to not be afraid anymore, and I just decided to go for it. So I asked Teresa if she was interested in taking our food diversity audio rooms to another level, because we do want to expand. We do want to collaborate with professionals out there. We do want to grow. We do want to learn more. So we decided to start off this venture with launching food diversity first, but we got to be creative. So we converted food diversity, the name, into Global Food Network, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're reaching out to everybody for their food journeys. Um, and we are planning on launching our website on October 1st. And we're planning on launching our first episode for Global Food Network on November 14th, which is in lines with American Thanksgiving. And so we want to use that time not to introduce our team members. In general, we have a group of 8 people right now, and we have 8 different branches. So those individuals are now going to help me with administrative stuff, but they're also going to be team leads the same way Teresa is the team lead for Global Food Network. She owns this, and we are working together to expand and make it awesome. The same thing with other branches as well. I don't want to go too much into detail with that just yet because we're still in the developmental phases for that. But Global Food Network is, I would say, about 80% there. And the first episode that we're trying to do is not only introducing the team, but also talking about what is Thanksgiving in the United States, at least. And because we are a diverse group of women, uh, of all different ethnicities, identities, orientations, abilities. I want to be able to discuss what Thanksgiving means to them and what specific foods they eat during Thanksgiving as a starting point, as a connecting point with everybody. So that's October, November, and then eventually we will but we will launch our second branch early February of next year. So that is a 6 to 8 months plan for now. As far as 12 months, we have 2 other branches that we're trying to launch during the remaining 4 months, which are still work in progress. So I don't want to say too much, but I hope that kind of helps you understand on what the plans are for the next few months for now.
You've got a lot of things happening. There's an awful lot of planning involved in that. It sounds incredible, and I can't wait to see all the outputs from OZK or OZK Studios and this global food network and all the food journeys, whether they're coming from Vancouver, Canada, or whether they're coming from San Francisco and everywhere else on the planet. It sounds like you've got a real global discussion happening here, and of course, we love that on this show. Finally, before we run out of time, I want to ask you both, is there anything else that you want to share with our worldwide audience today? It might be something we've touched on already that you'd like to expand on, or maybe something that I haven't covered or asked you. And secondly, and really importantly, if people want to find out more about the Global Food Network and all the great work that you've got coming down the road, where's the best place to send people to? Where do we point them to at this stage?
I will start off and then I'll lead it over to Noni. I would say, interestingly enough, something we haven't yet spoken about, which is one of our episodes was on the blue zones. And the blue zones are, it's a Netflix series that was done, and Dan Buettner was the head of it. And it has expanded into a global movement of its own in a way. And so it's something that I'll put in now as it's not only an episode that we did in the audio room, it's something that Noni, I think you had said you hadn't yet heard of blue zones. And that is, these are 5 areas that were created or were found to have the most centenarians. And they discovered why in terms of exercise and food and drink and mindset. And so these are areas that actually have people living not only longer, but the longevity of their living is healthier than ever. You know, there's not the illness, the allergies, the this, the that. The happiness level is incredible. And so interestingly enough, there was just the first Blue Zones retreat in Costa Rica. So I will say that for me, something that I'm excited about and that, you know, will be in somewhere in the next 6 to 12 months for Global Food Network is we will work on that and expand on that, because living well and living long don't always go in hand. And when you can find a way to live beautifully well and to increase that around the world as well, then that is even better. So I'll say that's mine, and then I'll put it over to Noni. And Noni, you have our um, links in terms of, we've just created our websites and all that, and I can also add in where people can find us at the end. But over to you, Noni.
One of the things that I did want to mention is that even though Teresa and I seem complete opposites in every way, with the way we talk, the way we dress, the way we approach things, the way we communicate, we still find a way to have a common ground and a mutual understanding when it comes to discussing things that are important to us. And that is definitely food and mental health, because food also takes a huge part in our mental health as well. It's not just the body, it's our mind. So I just wanted to kind of ensure that this was on record, because we did not talk about this. Our styles are very different and our approach to things are very different. We actually are wearing black and white because that is what the industry people do within food service. And Teresa and I, if we were to walk in a room together, I would be in a hoodie and shorts and just be all casual. But then Teresa would be in there with her fancy dresses and, you know, earrings and the high heels and all of that stuff. Very, very professional looking. So I just wanted to mention that because that's just how the relationship works.
Our yin yang.
Yes, exactly. Definitely, definitely. And what we're doing right now, Simon and everyone else, we're working on the website. We're in the testing phases of it right now. But if anyone who does want to reach out to us, they're more than welcome to reach out to us via LinkedIn individually, or if they want to reach out to us in general, I can send you an email address for both of us, or just the company in general. And if they have any questions regarding OZK or OZK in general, or Global Food Network specifically, they're more than welcome to reach out to us on that email address. And that is studiosozk@gmail.com. But I'll send it via email or, you know, chat later if needed.
And it can be put on as a label if that works for you, Simon. And definitely, LinkedIn has been an excellent, not only resource for networking and all of that, it's definitely, you and I, Simon, we connected on X Spaces originally, the previous Twitter, and then through LinkedIn. And I found that globally, for anyone who does want to reach out to us, LinkedIn is an excellent way at the moment, because it also gives people a chance to see the audio rooms, the engagement, anything on the posts, as well as I believe for both of us, we have the way to, you know, reach out to us. So request services. So thank you for asking that.
Well, it's great, and thanks both for sharing that information. I was fascinated about the Blue Zones discussion as well, because I don't think it's as well known in certain circles as it should be. And I think you're right in terms of that journalist stroke. I think he was National Geographic Explorer originally, wasn't he? And I
Yes,
think
he
it's
was.
always, I think Japan, Okinawa always gets mentioned, but various communities around the world where they have these, quote, blue zones, with this sort of longevity of life, this sort of happy, fulfilling life, and people reaching into a healthy old age, which is, also another great topic, and how food plays a key part in that. But thank you for sharing the links and the discussions, and Noni, your also discussion about the differences and being able to come together on topics, different people with different coming at things from different perspectives. I mean, that's a very topical conversation at this moment in time, globally, particularly in the US. So, being able to come together, and how two sides or two different opinions can actually make a discussion better ultimately, if there's understanding, and people are coming to the conversation openly. And you've mentioned things like learning and being able to share some things there. So hopefully this episode has given people some things to think about. And it feels to me like you've literally blown a few snowflakes off the top of the iceberg here when it comes to this topic. It's like there's so much in so many areas, and I'm sure you're both excited in that. But thanks so much, very much, for sharing that. And of course, we'll add some of the links down in the show notes when we publish this episode. But it brings me nicely to the end of our discussion today here on the Global Discussion. We've had a truly global discussion today, and I want to thank everybody around the world who's been watching or listening to this great episode with two great guests. And make sure that you follow, you like, you subscribe, do everything I need you to do to help support the Global Discussion show. And make sure you go out and check out what Tereza and Noni are doing over at the Global Food Network and over at OZK Studios. It's going to be an interesting journey, that's for sure, with lots of great conversations to come. But look, all that remains is for you to join me back here for some more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers like Tereza and Noni. But thanks for both being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you both.
Thank you very much, Simon. Very much appreciate you allowing me to be here. I don't think I've ever been in a global podcasting situation before, so this is an amazing experience. So very much humbled by it, and thank you very much for the experience.
And Simon, thank you. Just such a pleasure to join with you. Not only, again, congratulations on such a success that you've been creating, and we're just honored and pleased. This has been a fantastic time together. Again, it is feeling like it's been around the table. So appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing from everyone around the world and continuing the discussion.
Well, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you both for being great guests here on the Global Discussion.